What is remarkable about Pokemon Scarlet and Violet is that for as much as they were marketed and often perceived as the Pokemon games that allowed the player to do more than ever, explore this open world with all of these new and unforeseen opportunities, what the games do best, I believe, is in pulling back, doing less, exercising a bit of restraint when it comes to the characters and the central emotionality and pathos of the work, and focusing on small moments, quiet relationship drama. There's nothing histrionic, there's nothing too overtly moralistic here. No one's giving you clear dictates on how to feel. Instead, there is simply this vast and uncertain world and the attempts of people who are young and ambitious and thoughtful and scared and confused and uncertain to try to navigate that world. I talked previously about Nimona, and I still maintain that she is one of the best rival characters in the entire franchise. But I would also like to talk now about the character that has probably received the most praise out of all the characters in the game, that being Arven, who at first appears to be a grumpy jerk, and yeah, he is to an extent, but there's a lot more to him than that, which perhaps is predictable. Of course, he's not going to be a simple, one-dimensional caricature, but how subtly and thoughtfully and implicitly a lot of details about his character are revealed is a bit surprising. He is the son of the professor, either Turo or Sada, and he is neglected. He has not had a lot of contact with his parent, and while he does not want to complain about this, it clearly bothers him, especially when he sees that rather uncaring parent portrayed in such a positive light. Arven is not the first occasion of the Pokemon franchise looking at these broken parent-child relationships. Much of the best drama in the series has come from such relationships. They are a perfectly good and solid fit for a franchise like this that has to do a lot of storytelling without a lot of overt emphasis on plot points and complicated character narratives. The focus of these games is on your adventure, as it should be. The story is a side point. This is not Fire Emblem, and this is not Final Fantasy. Whether that's a positive or not is something that depends on your personal taste, but for a game like this, it is the best way and the most efficient way of storytelling. So for storytelling like that, you need a solid, sturdy foundation, one that anyone can understand. The parent-child relationship is that, and it also works because these are games for parents and children. That might sound like an obvious point, but it's an important one. When the games were originally released, they were made by adults. They were made by a lot of very thoughtful and passionate adults, but the target audience of the game was children, and children did play them. They played them a lot and became obsessed with them, and that was almost 30 years ago now, when the first Pokemon games came out in Japan. Now those kids have grown up. Many of them are still playing Pokemon, or at least have a lingering affection for the series and will pick it up every now and then. And a lot of them do have kids of their own. It's like Disney, the person, talked about almost a century ago. Appealing to parents is as important as appealing to children. Pixar perfected that to an art, making films that appeal to children's wild sense of adventure while also playing to the anxieties and uncertainties of parents. Now, Pokemon games are not quite that good and that nuanced in their storytelling, but when they work in these parent-child stories, I think they work on a similar level. And the manipulated and neglected child is a shining example of this kind of storytelling. Though for me, the most exemplary example of it is Lily and Lusamine. Lily is quirky, she's energetic, she's effervescent at first, and you see that, but there's this darkness, this anxiety, this sense of buried regret and sorrow. And much of it stems from her mother, who did at one point act as a caring guardian, but eventually became so obsessed. Lily still has those good memories, and she still deeply cares about her mom. But she is also overwhelmed by the tyrannical, selfish, egotistical, controlling person her mother has become. And the game delves into this kind of fraught, heartbreaking storytelling without being too overdramatic or blunt about it. If you get it, you get it. And if you are above a certain age playing these games, the games phrase it thoughtfully and clearly enough that you will get it, but it's not forcing you to think about these relationships in an instrumentalized and moralistic way. Arven's story works in much the same way. I would not say it's better than Lily's story in Sun and Moon, though it is significantly better than the Ultra Sun and Ultra Moon story, which completely severs the emotional core of the Sun and Moon story. Yes, I'm still bitter about that. The Professor is a more ambiguous character here. They are not a villain, necessarily. Not to the game, and not to Arven. The game gestures that the Professor ultimately tried to do their best, that they did love their son, even if they were not always able to show it. And Arven mostly accepts this, but there is this fundamental sense of lingering unease at not being able to spend as much time with his parent as he wanted. All those years of neglect that built up cynicism in Arven don't go away. And the game does not necessarily force the player to accept this positive, relatively, interpretation of the relationship between the Professor and Arven. One could see it as being as deleterious and harmful as Lily and Lusamine's relationship in Sun and Moon, even if not as overtly. All I will say regarding Arven and his parent is that the game creates quite a striking juxtaposition between Arven's actions and the actions and behavior of the Professor. Arven, despite being a bit stolid and a bit morose at times, excels in the sphere of action. Not in terms of being an action hero, swinging from vines and the like, but in terms of what he does. He creates all these delicious sandwiches for himself, for you, and for his sick dog, Mabostiff. These meals are a kind of ceremony, a kind of ritual that bring you closer to Arven and represent a kind of healing for both Mabostiff overtly and for Arven more subtly. This is an example of the kind of acting, the kind of doing that Ruskin, the great English Victorian philosopher and art critic, spend so much time thinking about. It is removing oneself from the world of idle contemplation, from looking at all of these forms and regulations and so-called rules, all these conventions for how behavior should be. They're too rigid, they are too mechanical, they deprive the individual and they deprive the community. They deprive a sense of organic connection between people and their history, and between people and the opportunity to come close and come immediately to their experience. If that last part sounds weird, think of Emerson, perhaps, or Whitman, or Thoreau. There is a discrepancy between the ordinary, routine, mechanistic way of acting, which is living only in this twilit, paltry, bloodless sense, and active living. Being alive, being aware, having a sense of closeness to the moment as it passes, to experience as it's being lived, to yourself and your own feelings and your own relationships with others, and to your social environment and to your natural environment, and to the routines of how you act, how you behave, how you think about the world. Hannah Arendt talks about these ideas too. She calls it the vita activa, the active life, a concept she gets from Aristotle but expands upon. The vita activa is about not this idealistic, abstract world, but the world of acting, the world of revealing yourself to others and to yourself through the choices that you make. This is the plane of relationships. This is the plane of connection. And this is the plane that is too often lost for Arendt in modern society, which is so focused on the utilitarian and the needlessly mechanistic, the rote repetition of routine. This is what Arven is about. A guy who might not be the most open, the most friendly, but has, in his actions, demonstrated a willingness to open up and create these connections. The professor is the opposite. The professor has this glamorous reputation and is overtly this wonderful, radiant character, but in reality, those virtues are for the professor only abstract. The professor is stuck chasing these magisterial, mythic dreams and ambitions. They're off pursuing all of their fancies and burying themselves in their research while ignoring the world of action, ignoring their obligations to their son and to the outside world in general. They've closed themselves off and encased themselves in this ideal world. There is definitely a difference, and the game definitely prioritizes and favors Arven's way of looking at things. So thank you all for watching. If you liked what you saw today, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Donate to my Patreon if you can and do want to see more videos like this. Keep playing Scarlet and Violet. The games, I'm glad to see, are finally getting the credit they deserve. Anyway, tune in soon for next analysis. We'll be coming soon. Promise you that. Thank you all again. Adios, comrades.